Welcome, boys and girls, to this special festive pod. A grotty Christmas tale so twisted and odd. A dark tale and timely, the littler here will find it too gruesome, but you've nothing to fear. This tale seeped out of a most twisted mind. It belongs to Luke Aldridge, and I know that you'll find that it tickles your chestnuts and leaves out mince pies, but doesn't make you want to pluck out both your eyes. So come with me, friend. I have lists to inspect. Reindeer and presents, they've all been checked. But if you're worried on this eve of the special day that it may happen to you, then happen it may. Welcome to the Podtime Christmas story. Ho, ho, ho!
This week's story is a little more gruesome than usual, so you may want to have a listen before you play it to little ears. The Thing Before Christmas, read by Tom Dussek. Music composed and performed by Dave Poulton, and the story was inspired by Santa is Coming by Stefan Koidl.
Once upon a time. That's how all good tales begin. This story, I'll tell you, you'll drink it all in. For this is a warning to all girls and boys who wait for Saint Nick to bring their Christmas toys. A town just like yours, not too big or too small. Not quite a city, but it has its own mall. And there in that centre, for all your shopping needs, there's a grotto for confessing all your bestest of deeds. From 6 weeks before the most specialist of days, he works 9 till 7, or so the sign says, and he'll chat and he'll listen to each single wish, then sprinkle some magic. Bo diddly dish. Nick is his name, but he's not always Claus. He's an odd job man, and he'll help you with yours. Except those 6 precious weeks where he gets to spread joy to mums and to dads, to each girl and boy. In all his long years of doing this gig, he's had many elves since the grotto got big. They help with the kids and take photos and such. Breaks they are few and the pay isn't much. So elves come and go from year unto years. But one elf returns to those pointy old ears. Her name is Holly. She's a lovely local lass. She relishes her job, although others may pass. Caring for Mum usually takes up her day. They live down the road, and their house, you may say, isn't all that, and they keep to themselves, except round this time when she's one of Nick's elves. Reading and drawing and jewellery making are some of the things that she does when Mum's taking a nap after lunch, but her main love, you see, is her bi-weekly sesh mastering archery. She's been quite the bowman ever since she was small, but she keeps that quiet from those at the mall. She doesn't chat much, except when he'll lend an old Nick ear to his most Christmassy friend. She's loved from afar by a quietish bloke. He's tall and he's kind, and he never doth smoke. He's known our Holly since together at school, but he's never told her that he thinks she's cool. This fella's called Noel. He's a security chap. I'm done with the names now. I hope you liked Fap. And orbit each other at the mall every days, unless their paths cross and then one of them says, "Long time no see, how's it going?" or such. The conversation starts, but they never say much. They're both far too shy to ask, "Fancy a drink?" They're nicely matched. Well, at least that's what I think. One random day of those 6 weeks of cheer, something came out of the sky and fell near to the mall and the town, but went out just a smidge, crossed the canal and then down past the bridge. The thing was a rock that had come from the stars, out past Uranus, or could be from Mars, and landed despite it not being invited. I'm not really sure how it was never sighted. Here comes old Nick on his way home from work. The route was the one that he usually took to his boathouse, where he lived for many a year. Always a dreamer, with nothing to fear. A couple of beers and a curry for one, with something quite juicy for his furry son. A hound he called Bonzo. He'd had him since birth, and Nick loved that dog more than anything on earth. On went a movie, and down went the grub. Pints from the tap of his localist pub. Just Nick and his doggles were both sleeping soundly, without a clue of the thing now around thee. Something had come down deep inside that rock. Something not like us. You'd happily block it from coming too near to yourself or your kid. But did old Nick hear it? Not one little bit. The boat where Nick lived with his furry old mate was cosy and welcoming. I think it's great, but it's not the securest of places to stay, as poor old Nick found out on that most fatefulest day. Only ajar the window left, but it was enough to get in past the mutt. Then on, despite hearing the farts and the snores, our Nick was still dressed as old Santa Claus. Whatever this thing, it required a host, so it squidged and it squadged straight to our Nick and the most obvious opening, Nick's gaping wide gob. Wasting no time, it went down, did that blob. Out came a cough and a hack and a groan. His eyes, they shot open, rolled back, and the moan which woke Bonzo and Barky did bark loud and strong. He didn't know what, but knew something quite wrong had befallen his master. He knew that a vibe was coming from Nick, something else was alive and wriggling around in his chunky old frame. Bonzo could tell that this wasn't a game. Then old Nick froze. All the fight had just ceased, as if an agreement had been met, and at least for the time being they would get on as one bod, which really spooked Bonzo, the soppy old sod. What happened next, I'm afraid I can't say. Trust me, it would cause you too much dismay, because Nick Thing was hungry for what he cared no, and faithful old Bonzo had nowhere to go. The next day at the mall, when Nick didn't show, no one could replace him in Santa's grotto, so they called him, no answer, straight to his voicemail. Our Holly decided to pick up the trail. Grabbing her bag and her coat, she was leaving, excuses and rumours that she wasn't believing. For all of the years that she'd known her old chum, he'd had no sick days, nope, not even one. Noel, as it happened, was ending his shift, and spotted Elf Holly, so offered a lift, which she happily took to see old Nick and check on her bud, if he really was sick. They parked and walked down to the place where he moored. That is the place where you keep a boat stored. And they got to his home, which was eerily quiet, and found a big mess, like there'd been quite a fight. Things were kicked over, loads of stuff smashed, and something was bloody. Looked like it was mashed with a hammer or similarly heavy and thick. And when it dawned upon her, our Holly was sick. Down the front of her coat with the realization of who was the victim of such mutilation. Poor Bonzo had come to a hideous end. Who did this to Nick's dearest and most precious friend? Out of Nick's boat and into fresh air, away from the gore and the nightmare down there. It struck them how quiet it was on this stretch, but what they saw next made both of them retch. Every one of Nick's lovely neighbours, who always said hi, would always do favours, had been torn to bits, mashed down to a paste, with bits of them missing, just leaving the face to... Now that they'd witnessed this hideous scene, they called the cops and they were both keen to get out of there ASAP and back to Noel's car, but the Nick Thing hadn't really gone far. Watching from undergrowth o'er the canal, it barely resembled Holly's old pal. The red suit and beard were still there, of course, but bits had been added with minimal force. More pairs of arms than you could surely count, plus additional legs of a scary amount. What once was Nick you would not recognise, with teeth in their scores and dozens of eyes. Holly and Noel didn't know where to go, run for the hills or wait for Popo. They didn't feel safe and they were both in a blither, so to Holly's place to fetch bow and quiver. One swift trip home, now Holly was armed, and back they did head, feeling much less alarmed. For as something tried to put them in a pie, Holly would loose one straight into their eye. They picked up a trail that led off from the punt, and suddenly they were off on the hunt. Noel worked hard to keep up, couldn't lose her, as Holly shot off towards Nick's favourite boozer. When they arrived at the old soapy frog, the scene they were met with couldn't quite log in their heads. It was ghastly, so gruesome and tangled, for all of the patrons so horribly mangled. Parts of them missing, bits all around. None of the eyeballs would ever be found. They searched the whole place, they found no one. But Noel, he unearthed the landlord's shotgun. Armed to the teeth, our pair picked up the trail. Thick, bloodied tracks. You just couldn't fail to see where it headed, calling it houses, devouring people, their kids and their spouses. All of these body parts doing their bit. Nickthing now looked like he would be fit to burst, more like a huge centimapede. I mean, how many legs can one Santa creature need? Holly and Noel arrived at the centre, clear as crystal what they were meant to do: kill monster chops, try to save Nick, do something drastic if he were too sick. The place was deserted, no one around. But in the distance, a gurgling sound was coming from where the grotto was set. Nickthing was in there, the safest of bets. Eyes cast upon it, they could not comprehend that Nickthing had once been our Holly's dear friend. It had grown so tall, with bits stacked on top of other bits, but you couldn't tell where they stop. Eyeballs in dozens, at least 20 arms, teeth counting hundreds would do you some harms. A grotto-y nest it had made for itself that looked big enough to house something else. Then what Holly saw made her sick to her belly. Knee-high and purplish, wobbled like jelly, she spied between all of the arms and the legs dozens upon dozens upon dozens of eggs. Holly and Noel came up with a scheme, something that probably felt rather mean, till you realize it could be them or us, saving the world from it drowning in pus. Into the camping shop our heroes did dash, gathering up all the canisters of gash and loading them into a large shopping cart. Now their cunning plan could officially start. Noel went down to the lowest of floors, loaded the lift full, but so the doors could close, but not before opening the flow of dozens of bottles of gas on the go. As the lift pinged and the doors opened wide, Nickthing peered round to see what was inside. But before it could work out the reasoning why, a flaming tipped arrow was let loose to fly. Straight into that lift filled with flammable fumes, which caught alight instantly, and then it consumes all of the air in that space, turning it into flame and clearing a path like some terrible game. Nickthing and Grotto went up like a light, gone with the hopes that our Holly, she might save her friend, grab the it, and then separate him from what chose Nick, and then let itself in. Nickthing screaming, flames licking its face. Holly knew they should get out of this place, but as Noel arrived back from doing his part, water above them, dripping, did start. The sprinkler system, it started to douse everything, Grotto to Wendy House. On it went just for a minute or two, coming to a halt as the flames now were few. Holly and Noel could plainly see that all of the eggs had been entirely destroyed in the fire, and shared a high five. But didn't last long. Something in there, alive. Nickthing came staggering, burnt half to death, crispy and charred. What a hideous meth. But dead it was not, so our heroes weren't done. An obsolete plan. They needed a new one. Holly didn't think, she just got out and did. It couldn't get out. She had to get rid of the thing that had murdered old Nick and his mates. She needed to open those fiery gates and shove it on through, so she drew back her bow and let her shot fly, keeping it nice and low, and it pinned a leg to the wall right behind it, showed it who's boss, as if she need to remind it. Shrieking in pain, the Nickthing cried out, but Holly no longer in any doubt as she fired another of her arrows true, straight into its chest, and more followed too. She carried on shooting. Nickthing she did pin, and then came the kill shot that signaled the win. But Holly, she paused before letting it fly, consumed by the memories of Nick, days gone by. She turned to Noel, who said not a word. Instead, smiled gently, supportively told her that she had to do it for old Nick's sake. Take this last shot. Kill this alien snake. Holly's arrow shot out from her trusty old bow. High above reindeer and artificial snow, the Nickthing did spot what was clearly the end, dispensed by his favoritist, elfiest friend. Their eyes met, Holly's and Nickthing's, so many. There was no sadness in those eyes, not any. For Nick was there, staring back for a second, willing on Holly, at least that's what Noel reckoned. Straight through the forehead of Nickthing it passed. No more shots left, this arrow her last. It ended Nick's torment. He could rest in peace, even with hundreds and hundreds of teeth. Holly hugged Noel, and Noel hugged her back. Victorious they were with this plan of attack. Thing dead, they let out celebratory cheers. They'd wake up tomorrow, Christmas ringing in their ears. But this kind of tale doth tend to unravel, so back to the boat you and I we will travel, and see that a second rock, much the first's equal, will happily provide us with at least one more sequel.
The Thing Before Christmas was written by me, Luke Aldridge. It was read by Tom Dussek, and the soundtrack was composed and performed by Dave Poulton. The story was inspired by Santa Is Coming by Stefan Koidl. Editing, sound production and general oral wizardry by Hanson Bob Field. The introduction was read by Tom Dussek. Saxophone and clarinet was played by Toby James, guitar by Simon Coleman, keys by 80s Dave Oliver, bass by Andrew McKinney. The theme was written by me. I also played drums and stuff. The Podtime Stories logo was created by Martin Herity, and the pod was written and produced by me. Podtime Stories is a Papa Bear Chronicles production. Text and recording copyright Luke Aldridge 2024. The right of Luke Aldridge to be identified as the author of this work has been asserted by him in accordance with the Copyright Designs and Patents Act 1988. All rights reserved. Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas, lovely listener. How are we doing? I hope all's good and that you've been nice this year. Have you got some carrots and mince pies to leave out under the Christmas tree? I do hope so. So welcome to The Thing Before Christmas, our Christmas special here at Podtime Stories, read by the lovely Tom Dussek. Tom, as you probably remember, was the reader of The Flag, a story from a few weeks ago. I won't waffle on too much about Tom, because I already have done. He's the voice of a whole bunch of bits and pieces. Some Thomas the Tank Engine characters. He's the Fat Controller, who's not called the Fat Controller anymore, as well as Santa on the Thomas Christmas Special episode. Thank you so much, Tom, for not only reading that one, but getting involved and reading a second story for us, as well as the fabulous introduction. I'm very grateful for you lending us your dulcet tones, and what gorgeous tones they are. My goodness. I had a proper moment re-listening to the final edit of this in the car on the way home today before I record these extras. And Tom, I can't say it enough. Your voice is completely fabulous, and I love what you've done with this. Thank you very much. It's good of you. So a bit about the story. The story was inspired by an absolutely horrendous painting that I saw. It's called Santa Is Coming, and it's by an Austrian artist, Stefan Koidl. I hope I've pronounced his last name correctly. But I've put the image up on the website. Please go and have a look at it, because if you see it, you'll know exactly what kind of triggered my brain into writing this thing. So just for a bit of context, it's essentially a kind of what could be seen as quite a classic, beautiful painting of a mantelpiece, a fireplace, that sort of thing. A couple of stockings up and blah, blah, blah. And then there's this Santa creature with completely glazed eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'm looking at it now. 7 arms coming out and kind of filling a stocking with one and reaching around to grab other bits and pieces with another. And it's proper scary. So that gave me the idea of essentially how that creature became that creature. I'm a big fan of the John Carpenter film The Thing. Something that I didn't see until probably about 5 or 6 years ago. I don't know how, but I just had never seen it. And then I've mentioned the cinema before that Bob and I ran. We screened it at, I believe, the Hellfire Caves in Wickham. And that was the first time that I saw The Thing. Completely loved it. So the idea really was the night before Christmas, if it was directed by John Carpenter in his kind of The Thing era. There's also a couple of other bits and pieces that were in the mixing pot with this. There's a great film by James Gunn, he of Guardians of the Galaxy fame. He worked as a writer on loads of different bits and pieces, but the 2 live-action Scooby-Doo films were his. Before he became a director, there are a couple of brilliant, very low-budget indie films that he did. One is called Super, which is a bizarre kind of dark comedy about a guy who essentially becomes a vigilante superhero. But it's really about, he has no powers, he has nothing particularly special about him. It's about mental health. It's about mental health issues, and it's definitely worth a watch. It's very cool stuff, but pretty dark. Another film of James Gunn is called Slither. Slither is a kind of classic monster film, and the plot of that certainly inspired part of The Thing Before Christmas. It's set in a little town in America. There is a meteor that comes down. I think he's the mayor, who's a bit of a douchebag, essentially gets infected by something, and yeah, it's really great. It's not the easiest thing to find. I think I had to end up buying it on Blu-ray as an import because I saw it years and years and years ago and hadn't seen it for ages and wanted to catch up on James Gunn stuff after enjoying the Guardian stuff so much. So yeah, they all kind of, the John Carpenter stuff, Slither, they all kind of fed into the story of The Thing Before Christmas. I hope you enjoy it. It's a fairly long one. I think it's sort of around 14-15 minutes long, but I do hope that you enjoyed Tom's reading of it. As I record this, the soundtrack hasn't been written, performed, recorded yet. I mentioned to Bob about how this would be kind of cool with a John Carpenter soundtrack. He writes all of his own synth stuff and performs it as well. And Bob mentioned Dave Poulton. He put me in touch, we had a chat, and I'm really looking forward to hearing the soundtrack that Dave produces. So Dave is a professional Foley artist. He's recorded Foley for all sorts of bits and pieces over the years, but it was really lovely for Dave to get involved, and I think this was just something a bit different for him, really. So it's lovely to have you involved, Dave. Thank you very much for your time and energy. As I say, I'm really looking forward to hearing this and seeing what you've done with it. I'm sure it will be fabulous. As always, details of our contributors, Dave and Tom, will be on the website, thepuppetbearchronicles.com, but also check out the image. As I say, Santa is Coming is a wonderfully twisted, dark, horrendous image. Not the sort of thing that you want to be putting in front of the kids on Christmas Eve, but do check it out. You can find that at our website, and also links to Stefan Koidl's website and his Instagram stuff, because I think he's brilliant. It's pretty dark, it's a bit twisted, but the work that he does is completely wonderful. He makes physical masks as well as being a painter. So yeah, do check his stuff out. It's very cool. As always, my very deepest thanks and love goes out to handsome Bob Field for all his time that he puts in. You know, when a middle-aged fat bloke turns up with a pair of sleigh bells and says, "Right, Bob, we're going to do a Christmas version of the intro," not an eyelid batted. Bless him. He just got on and did the silly nonsense that I threw at him. So thank you, Bob. Merry Christmas. If you've enjoyed the podcast and you've got a minute, it would be great if you could share, subscribe, review, all of that good stuff if you've got a second. It does help us get our stuff out a bit further, makes a few more people see what we do, and just makes us feel warm and cozy inside. And it is, you know, the season of good cheer and all that. So yeah, if you've got a second, that'd be great. You can find all of our social media stuff at thepuppetbearchronicles.com. So it's just left for me to wish you a very happy Christmas. Thank you very much for sticking with us so far. We're 8 stories in, 2 left. The Boy with the Peaches Bun next week, and we'll be finishing off with a story called Who Are You? That's going to be read by Neil Roberts, who is the voice of our regular intro. And not only that, he's been a sidekick to Nick Fury. More about that in a couple of weeks. Take it easy. I hope that you stay safe and you get all that you asked for over the Christmas period, and sleep tight. Don't let the Christmas pod bugs bite. Ho, ho, ho.